Tara, this is a source that we both know, but I don't want to give it a name. They said we can use it on background. It says,
Okay.
I said, real quickly, if you have time this morning, can you please give me your thoughts on what's happening in Iran? And he said, incredibly unstable situation.
Mm.
I don't think it's disconnected from the chaotic, without a planned messaging from the White House. While many certainly fear Trump's wrath, I think others, including Netanyahu, think the lack of there means that they do what they want. And we see what happens later. Iran is severely weakened, though. So that's the only reason that this could be contained, if there is a reason for it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that they make decisions based on when they think they can. I mean, President Trump has lost interest in the war in Israel. I mean, I think you saw in Gaza. I think you saw that when he came to the Middle East and he didn't stop in Israel on the way back to meet with Bibi Netanyahu. I think there's a feeling that he's dealing with so much on the ground at home that everyone can advance their military plans without having to really run it by him, right? Without having to make sure, although he says he's been aware all along, and he said there's a lot more coming. I mean, he said that to ABC this morning, so I'm not sure what that means. And when he was asked if that meant that there'd be American military intervention, he said he can't comment on it right now. So he's actually escalating it even further. But certainly, I mean, they were in the middle of talks with Iran. They were supposed to have talks on Sunday, which makes me think either it was like a wink, wink, nod, nod, and they were playing Iran the whole
Yeah.
time, or Trump's getting played.
Well,
You know, that's
that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Go
yeah.
ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's hard to say right now. I mean, because of course he's going to say, "I knew all along. I'm behind Netanyahu." But then, why did we just evacuate our embassy in Iraq just yesterday? If we were always in on it, like that's a pretty quick evacuation. 24 hours ago, we decided
Yeah.
to get our officials out of the region. I mean, that makes me to me that suggests that they haven't really been clued into this all along, or they haven't been supportive of this. That they don't have
Uh,
control of the situation, frankly.
yeah, and that's why I'm looking down, because I'm going to respond exactly to what you said, another source. But make sure you guys hit the hearts, because it does hit the like, because it affects the algorithm. The more people become, in these streaming streets, you got to say that right there. It does affect the algorithm, and it really does. And more people become aware of our conversation. Make sure you follow Tara Palmeri on Substack, as well as on YouTube and all of the other sites that she's on. Just go and Google Tara Palmeri. Right
Thank you
there,
for
and
having me.
follow.
I feel like I'm a part of the Lemonati now. Is that right?
No, it's the Lemonation.
Lemonation.
It's supposed to be the Lemonati. I ran into one of the lemon heads that said, "I'm a lemon head. I'm a part of the Lemonation." But I tried to get in touch with you, and she said it should be the Lemonati. That's what you should name it. So maybe that'll be the next tier in our membership on YouTube. It'll be
Yeah,
the Lemonati. So
Lemonati.
another
I'm
source.
buying it. I'm joining it.
Another source, again, they said, off the record, you can use it, don't use my name. I think it is a sign that Netanyahu is worried about the discussions that the administration was having with Iran, similar to what you said. And this is an effort to scuttle them. It also has broader implications for the region, particularly those countries working towards normalizing with Israel. And it says, I do think we are headed towards a clash.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And you were saying it.
Yeah. And Israel never thought that whatever deal we were going to strike with Iran was going to be enough. Like that's just a fact. They didn't really trust the Americans to create a deal that was that would truly take out all of the facilities, destroy the uranium. Their facilities are underground. It's really hard to reach too. It's like deep buried into the earth. And I think that Netanyahu was like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And Trump, meanwhile, is taking calls from reporters. I mean, we should call him right now, honestly, and see what he has to say.
Do you have his number?
There's like
I
a
have his number
1% chance
somewhere.
he'll answer at this point.
What do you think would happen if I called him?
I called him on Saturday and he answered, Friday, technically, he answered at 11:57 p.m. Yeah, almost midnight. And then he took a call from Gavin Newsom after. What if you answered? I don't know. I think he has like a love-hate feeling about you. You know what I mean? It's like
Well, you're gonna have
he's
to
on.
clue me in, because I have an old number, I believe, but You'll have to, maybe you'll help me out.
They only it changes it like every 4 or 5 months, and the best time to call him is like the middle of the night, which is but also this morning because he's been talking to reporters all morning, and but obviously in his telling of it, he has been the one who has been apprised of this all along. He is supporting Netanyahu, but it doesn't seem like that has been the case. And also last night, usually Trump is the first person to respond to something like this, but it was Marco Rubio that responded, and then
Yeah,
his
it was.
truth came later. So I think that's also a sign that they're trying to distance themselves from Israel, but I think they realized this morning that they can't. But but maybe, a lot of people I spoke to this week, I mean, we kind of saw this coming. They thought it was going to happen on Sunday, not Friday
Yes.
or Thursday night, really, Friday their time.
So you mentioned Gavin Newsom. Let's talk about Gavin Newsom because
Yeah,
Gavin Newsom is, I believe, on a run for, he's running for president right now. But he has good reason to be in the news considering what's happened with the National Guard and with the Marines there. Now, a federal judge last night, um, pushed back on Donald Trump and told him that he needed to give back control of the National Guard to Gavin Newsom. And then they appealed it, and now you know it's back to Donald Trump. And then they're going to decide later next week, right? I believe on Tuesday, who gets control of the National Guard if what Donald Trump did was actually illegal. There's a drama playing out. Again, that's all leading up to Saturday's big, military parade a la North Korea style.
totally. And then I think that this court ruling, it'll probably end up going to the Supreme Court. I think that's where we're going
You
to end
think?
up going. Yeah, I think so with this one. And I thought the justice, well, he's not a justice, excuse me, his brother was a justice. But the judge said that, this is not a monarchy. We don't have kings in this country. You can't just decide unilaterally what you want to do in terms of, deploying the military. I think it's, as you said, Newsom is running politically, for president, and it's a great look for him to have a case Newsom v. Trump, right? Gets him in
Oh
the
my
box
God, he loves it. Yeah.
exactly where he wants to be. He appears to be winning for now. We'll see what public sentiment says. Then again, the state of California isn't exactly the best case of governorship, and actually administrative work. I don't know that he is necessarily the strongest contender, but for now, he certainly seems to be enjoying his moment in the sun. And and actually, Los Angeles has apparently calmed down. So that's something that we are, obviously seeing happening. And but then again, tomorrow, I mean, I looked at some security alerts everywhere around the country. There will be anti-King uh, protests, including in New York City, which I may check out. But in Washington, they're going to squash anything that looks like a protest. I don't know if you went to the inauguration, but the inauguration, there were zero protests. They're really good at making sure that are no protests happening when the president is anywhere within the vicinity. So
Yeah.
I would expect that the military parade goes forward, but there's supposed to be thunderstorms. Can you imagine that imagery?
Well, I think that it might be rained out. And but we'll talk about that. But let's get. They have the ability to be able to jam cell signals and all that, so that people can't communicate in Washington, especially around the White House and the Capitol. But also, No Kings said that it was their decision not to go there and to promote what Donald Trump was doing because they didn't want the cameras trained on him, and so they decided not to go to Washington D.C. They put out a statement and just to protest around the country or rally around the country in cities and places around the country rather than going to Washington, D.C., which I think is a very good strategy. And also, they believe that Donald Trump wants to beat up people. He wants to see people getting, smacked over the head and
Right.
detained publicly and on cameras. Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I think there is something that he likes. He likes the chaos. I think he likes to show that they're in control, but I don't the problem is that all the visuals do not project control. The visuals that we're seeing project they're disturbing. They're violent. Like you see a pregnant woman being pushed over, who says that she's an American citizen by ICE officers. I think this feels like COVID. This feels like the summer of Black Lives Matter. It feels like
George
George Floyd.
Floyd.
It
Yeah.
feels like unrest, instability. That's not what people vote for. they don't want that. There's a small number of people that do want this, that genuinely like have like they lust after this kind of action, right? To get back at their political enemies. But that's the extremes. Most people in that vote in the middle in these swing states and are moderates, they just don't, they want to feel calm. They don't want to have to think about these sorts of things.
Do you think the protests are a bad idea? Do you think it'll backfire on the no Trump folks or Democrats?
Depends on how they go. I mean, if they start throwing, like if it gets violent, if they're lighting, cars on fire and waving Mexican flags,
God,
yeah,
I'm so
that's not a
glad you
good
said
look.
that. That's
Yeah,
not a good. The Mexican flags and the burning cars did not help their cause at all. And I know people get all upset about it, but when you're messaging, you've got to be strategic about it and not give, metaphorically, your enemies any ammunition.
right. Do you think the protests were peaceful in LA?
I think that the protests were mainly peaceful in LA as they were, during the summer of 20, but there are always some knuckleheads in every single crowd. And I was, I'm glad you mentioned that because I went out yesterday here in New York City speaking to people and I ran into a bunch of people from Los Angeles. And they said they were really upset that they believe that the news media and the Trump administration, that they were portraying this as Los Angeles on fire. And they said, no, in our city, I live there every single day. It is really relegated to a few blocks in downtown Los Angeles. And if you looked at the pictures again, you would think like LA was on lockdown and that, all hell is broken loose in Los Angeles. And they said it's not the case at all. They believe that Donald Trump went and poked a hornet's nest and that they believe that the administration is responsible for all of the unrest that have played out on our television screens.
I have friends that have said the same thing. I mean, some of them work in industries that rely on, like restaurateurs that rely on workers that are undocumented. Um, but I think you're right. I think it was basically contained to downtown LA, which is a place that not a lot of people go to. It's near Skid Row. And I do think that the National Guard exacerbated what's going on, exacerbated the tensions and the feelings. But, I think it's hard to ignore when you see, the throughway and people throwing bricks at cops, and you're seeing Waymos off the streets because they're afraid they're gonna be lit on fire. Those are the robotic,
Well, they actually did light some on fire, right?
yeah, and then it's just it's the visuals are not great. It's hard to it's one if a protest looks like that, it's a bad optic. It's bad optics for the Democratic Party in the same way that they really got behind Abrego Garcia, even though he was unlawfully deported. When he came back into the country, they were like, "Ugh, all of the charges and the things that he was accused of doing, maybe he wasn't the right guy to stand behind." So I think the
Well,
point is
see, go ahead. Sorry.
I just think that the point is that when you decide which, like, where when you decide which position to take, you want to make sure that it's that you're fighting for the right fight and you're doing it
Well,
the right
here's
way.
what I think. I think that again, as I said, messaging is everything, right? I
Yeah,
think Democrats do and never Trumpers, so to speak, or people who believe in due process. I think they did a poor job of explaining to people and messaging that this was about due process more than
right,
it is
right,
about
right.
Abrego Garcia. But he happened to be the face of it. And how do you get around it with the charges? And also, they did not. I don't think they've done a great job of pointing out that these charges didn't come until after he was deported. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So,
Right.
it's a tough situation to be in. I don't know how you feel about that particular situation, but I feel if Abrego Garcia is guilty of anything, then of course he should face suffer the consequences. But
Right.
I do believe, and I read more and I'm not as partisan. I do believe that this is about due process rather than just
Yeah,
about
absolutely about due process. And
and
also,
misinformation spread by the administration. He had MS-13 on his hands. It's like, no, he did not. They were telling you that those were the symbols. Perhaps they do mean that, but it wasn't like MS-13 on his fingers.
here's the thing, though, I will say. I agree with you on the due process, but then you have to go back to the idea of why is this administration not able to just do to go through the steps, to do the due process? Like, is there a breakdown within their DHS, their ICE system that they're not able
You're
to do
so
it?
smart.
Because Obama was able to really he deported more people per day than President Trump, but he did it
Yeah.
through the process. And at one point when the Biden administration realized that, okay, we've let way too many, migrants into the country, they started deporting at an even higher rate than President Trump was deporting until recently. And they were able to do it through due process. So what are you guys doing wrong in ICE? Is it a mess? I mean, why can't you just go through the process? And and
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
really
isn't that the overall problem with this administration, Tara, is that they don't really know how to govern? If you look at what's happened with the big, beautiful bill, which is the only piece of legislation, if they do get it passed, that they will have, right? That's the only
yeah.
legislative accomplishment that he'll have under his belt. Everything else is executive order. That means that they have just sort of pushed it through everything by force, but they have not gone through the process of, having we're trying to meet with people in a bipartisan manner, having discussions with people, doing what you normally do in the Congress and the Senate. They have not done that because they don't want to work with anyone because they just want to push it through. So they're not really governing in the normal way. And perhaps that's the problem. Maybe they just don't know how.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have the numbers in the House. They barely have a majority. That Trump likes to use executive orders. They create noise. There are a lot of flash. There's shock and awe, and they did codify some of the Doge cuts, which I think were pretty significant. That just happened. They passed that, but
Yeah.
that just went to the House. Hasn't gone to the Senate yet. But I mean, it's they're not entirely united on all of those points, but you're right. I mean, they really haven't passed legislation, and we'll see how the big beautiful bill goes. But it seems like they are getting in line now that Elon's out of the picture and he's on his knees begging. But I understand that
That's
you
a whole
got
nother show, Tara. My
yeah,
goodness.
yeah, yeah. I know. I understand another member of the Lemon Nation is waiting to get on. So thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. And guys, of course,
No, no, no. I want you to stay. It's not that. I want you to stay. We didn't talk about Padilla. Do you want to stay or do you have to
yeah,
go?
yeah, yeah. I'm happy
Yeah,
to.
no, no.
I thought I had to bounce.
No, you don't
Uh,
have to bounce. We can stay for a while. We're going to invite him in and
okay.
have him come in and talk to us. Let's
I've
see.
never done it with 3 people. This is kind of exciting.
Ah, there you go. I mean,
Wait,
so
that
this
sounds
is
kind
how
of
I'm wanting to do this. And then there he is. Mike,
Hi.
how are you? We have Tara Palmeri here. Do you guys know each other?
Hey,
I
Mike.
don't. Hey, Tara.
How are you?
I'm good. How
Mike
about you?
Nellis is a big Democratic fundraiser advisor. He was an advisor to Kamala Harris and other things. And I like to bring him on because we like to fight.
No, we debate. We don't fight.
Love a fight.
So what do you? I want to hear from Tara, and then I'll hear from you, Mike. When you saw the video, Tara, of Senator Alex Padilla, what did you think?
I was just like, what is going on here? It seemed aggressive. It seemed unnecessary. And why were they tackling him to the ground? People can ask questions in America. Like, you're in a federal building. I just don't understand how that happened. I would like to see the whole video too, because obviously there's always like the distortion of like, he was lunging at her. It's like, was he lunging at her? Or was he just asking a question? And also, I've heard that a lot of these senators, they're complaining because they're not getting the briefings that they want. They're not from the cabinets. They're not even getting the
Yeah.
budget. They're not getting their questions answered. And it's like, do we have to resort to this where senators have to like try to find them out or about in their, at events just to be able to ask questions?
You're saying did you see Mark Kelly? Mark Kelly was on television this morning, Senator Kelly, and he said, we usually in a situation like that, especially of such import, we would be invited, he said, to participate or asked to participate or attend that press briefing, and they weren't even asked. And then, as you said, they're saying they're not getting the information. Look, I didn't see it from the very, very beginning. But I know there was no lunge because by the time they grabbed him, he was standing there trying to ask a question. There was no lunging at her.
Mhm.
Should he have acted that way? Look, that's a whole nother thing. But he is a sitting U.S. senator who did identify himself, and they treated him in that manner. Imagine how they treat people who don't have as much
They
power or as big a
they
platform as him.
cuffed him. Like, that is
Yeah,
just next level, right?
yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Well, he was escorted into the room by an FBI agent. He identified himself as a United States senator from a state where they federalized the National Guard without the approval of the governor.
His
Where they
state.
sent in the state where
His
they
state, yeah.
in state where they deployed 700 Marines in an overreaction to the situation in Los Angeles right now, and he's not getting the answers that he needs to keep his constituents safe. And that to me is a problem. So yeah, they were aggressive with him. They didn't need to throw him to the ground. They certainly didn't need to handcuff him, and they knew exactly who it was. And now they're lying about what happened and claiming he lunged at him and claiming he wasn't wearing his Senate pin. And the whole thing's ridiculous. But to the point, Tara, that you just made is like, this administration does not want to be held accountable to its actions. Don, you were talking about before I joined, they're not passing any laws. All they're doing is leveraging the power of the executive actions that they can do, most of which get overturned anyway or aren't enforceable. So they don't want to be held accountable to anything that they're doing. It's about as close to trying to turn Trump into a king, and then they don't want to show up to any congressional hearings and answer any damn questions. So I applaud Padilla for doing it. It's showing a little bit of fire, showing up.
While we're here, guys, we're having some
And
breaking
they
news,
were in
and I
a
want you.
state, you know, they were in California.
Yeah.
You would normally meet a cabinet official or president if in your state if they're there. That's an important thing. Like you know, if the agriculture secretary was there, I'm sure he would be there. She's and amidst everything that's going on right now, I mean, it made perfect sense for him to be there. You can't even say he was just there as like an antagonizer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they knew he was in the room. Like it's not like they didn't know who he was or they didn't know why he was there. But let's talk about like what would happen in a normal situation, right? In a normal, let's say there's a crisis in LA. Let's say it's like what happened in Minneapolis 5 years ago. There was a situation with the George Floyd protest. They'd gotten a little bit out of hand. Governor Walz calls in the National Guard. You work with both parties. Like this is not when there's property damage, when people's lives are at risk, you need everybody acting like adults. And Donald Trump isn't doing that. So it starts at the top. And Kristi Noem is all about the show. She doesn't care about doing her job. She just wants to play dress up, frankly, and cosplay as an ICE agent.
So apparently they traded numbers afterwards and talked.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Kristi Noem said, that I spoke to him and they didn't know, whatever. But it just seems like such it seems like a lie to me. I'm sorry. I think. And by the way, let's not forget that Kristi Noem has sat in Senate hearings taking questions from Alex Padilla. And I feel like any decent human being, you may have been startled from the beginning. I've been startled with people, yelling at me. And then, I'll say, well, let the gentleman speak, even if you're on live. Right? You don't have to be a robot. If you're on a live press briefing, you can say, oh, okay, someone is just, hang on. Oh, it's Senator Padilla. All right.
Yeah.
Hang on, Senator, and I'll answer your questions in just a moment. Let me just get this thought out. But they're like robots. There's nothing human about them. And perhaps maybe that's not in her capacity. But one would think, since she's a governor, right, that she would be able to do that. And as a governor, she said, no, Padilla, come on, guys. She knew who that was.
Yep.
Do you think
Maybe
I'm wrong?
she didn't though. And what if she didn't?
Yeah, it's even worse if she did know who he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's like all the.
Mike, are you up on Iran?
Enough. Yeah, I'm in London right now, but I know most of what's going on.
Okay, Tara, do you want to stay for this, or you're good?
You know what? I might have to drop out, unfortunately, but
that's okay.
But I thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tara. Let's do this on a regular basis. It's like
I would love to. I would love to join the lemonation.
Tara Palmeri, everyone. Thank you, Tara. Make sure you follow her and follow her Substack. Subscribe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Oh, I am well. I'm a little jet lagged, but I'm well.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. This is new information coming in on the situation in Iran. Islamic Republic of Iran state media, as well as individual Iranians, are reporting that there is heavy defense activity near Pasteur Square, Maidoun-e Pasteur. This is where the Supreme Leader's compound is located, along with various IRGC facilities, ministry. And it is saying, this is through sources. Sources are saying that Israeli forces are reportedly working to decapitate the Supreme Leader. We could be looking at a regime change. Islamic Republic of Iran state media says a recorded message from the Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader, will be aired shortly. Wow. That escalated fast, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Israel's not messing around. I'm not entirely sure what the right way to be handling it is. It feels like they made this action without the knowledge of the United States government. Certainly. I mean, Marco Rubio basically said so last night that we're not involved in what's happening right now. And it feels like a potentially very destabilizing situation. And like my initial reaction is, it's sort of like the known unknown of like we removed Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq and then created a massive problem in the Middle East. And I'm a little bit worried we're doing the same thing right now, or the Israeli government's doing the same thing right now. It feels chaotic. And I don't know how well thought out it is in terms of how it's going to impact people over time. And could cause more trouble in the future.
I want to read some. Let's see. I've been speaking to sources this morning, and I read some of this to Tara just a short while ago about the situation over there. But some folks believe that this escalated so quickly because Iran it was vulnerable at this point, and they were concerned about them creating a weapon that would just obliterate Israel. And also, perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu was not happy about the talks that Iran and America had been having, and he wanted to sort of scuttle that. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, well, I think it undermines what Trump has been trying to do, right? Like he's been working, what is this, 61 day of the 60th days that Trump gave Iran to agree to a deal. And I mean, Trump has been, let's walk this back for a second, because we had a deal with Iran to start to bring them into the international community, to de-escalate their nuclear situation, to move them away from being a rogue state under the Obama administration. And one of the first things Donald Trump did in his first year was to tear that up. And it was a good deal. And frankly, I think the deal that Trump was making with Iran was going to be a much worse deal based on the public reporting of it. It was going to allow them to continue to enrich uranium, which to me continues to show you how weak Donald Trump is. Like he's so desperate to just get what appears to be a win that he'll give you whatever you want. That makes me worried about the deal he's making with China on tariffs right now. And yeah, I think Netanyahu's not happy about it. And I think the Israeli government certainly feels like they're going to flex their muscle and they're going to create chaos to undermine that deal. And again, to me, it seems like without the consent of the United States government, which we are their biggest supporter. We're their biggest ally. So,
well, why is Donald Trump pretending that he had everything to do with this or something to do with it, and that he warned them, and that he is, on Bibi Netanyahu's side? And I think he didn't say this was exciting, but I think basically he's saying it was excellent that this happened.
Well, why does Donald Trump do anything? Like it's vanity, it's ego. So like, I mean, somebody asked in the comments, is like, why am I taking Rubio at his word? Is that I think that generally speaking, as much as I don't like Marco Rubio, he is one of the more trustworthy members of the Trump administration. And I think last night when he put out that statement, that was a legitimate reaction to it.
Can you tell them, basically paraphrase the statement for us so that folks will know?
Yeah, like, I mean, he basically put out a statement that was like, this is a strong military operation from Israel and we are not involved in it, but, we support Israel's right to defend itself, was basically what Marco Rubio said. I don't have it in front of me. So somebody has it and right. And then overnight, Trump is like, we had everything to do with it. And like, we knew everything that was going on. And like, I think it's that overcorrection that he has to do every time to be like, I'm the best and I'm the smartest and look how strategically thoughtful I am. Everything is a win. I never lose. And, again, this is also true to the point of the story with Padilla, is that there are moments in time when things get chaotic and messy, where military action has to happen, where there's riots and we got to step in. And it's important that government officials have a well of trust to draw from so that they can go, here's what I'm trying to do and here's why, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And Trump lies about everything. Mm-hmm. So he lies about stupid stuff. And so that's why you can't trust him. So like, I inherently don't take him at his word that they knew what was going on. And it's not the first time that one of our allies has done a military operation without us knowing about it. The Ukrainian drone strike on Russia was also done without U.S. involvement because they didn't feel comfortable telling them.
Make sure you guys hit the heart because we want people to hear this conversation. This is very important, and this is breaking news. So here's what Marco Rubio said. He said, tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Said Rubio. Israel advised us they believed this action was necessary for its self-defense. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. And let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. That is frightening because that could happen. Did you hear what Tucker Carlson had to say about this?
I haven't seen the statement, but I saw that he came out pretty strong against any U.S. involvement in Iran, right?
He did. And look, a broken clock. A broken clock, is right at least once. But I do have it here somewhere. But basically, here it is. I have it. A broken clock is right twice a day. He says, and I agree with Tucker Carlson. He said it's worth pointing out that a strike on the Iranian nuclear sites will almost certainly result in thousands of American deaths at bases throughout the Middle East and cost the United States tens of billions of dollars. The cost of future acts of terrorism on American soil may be even higher. Those aren't guesses. Those are the Pentagon's own estimates. A bombing campaign against Iran will set off a war, and it will be America's war. Don't let the propagandists lie to you. So, look, I'm not sure. I agree with that statement mostly, except for will it be America's war? I think Iran is, its a capacity to fight back is diminished right now, and that's one reason I think that Israel took these actions. So I don't know if they will target military bases or whatever, but I do believe that Iran is on the defensive. Right, they are in a wounded defense as well.
Yeah, but what I will say is, like, a wounded animal is dangerous, right? I mean, that's how we felt about Saddam in Iraq. We were like, oh, well, we can overwhelm them with shock and awe. And we did. We basically took over the country within a matter of weeks, right? I don't think it was a very long original operation. I'll never forget George W. Bush on that aircraft carrier with the Mission Accomplished banner.
Mission accomplished. Oh my
which
God.
is like one of the internet's greatest memes, frankly. But again, it's less about. I'm sure that Israel will probably win this conflict, would be my guess, depending upon how far they go. What comes next is always the problem, and a protracted, elongated fight that gives access to potentially worse leaders who are going to use worse tactics is what I worry about. In the same way that our invasion of Iraq created ISIS. And even to a certain degree, our involvement in the conflict in Afghanistan in the 80s to help them defeat the Soviets created Al-Qaeda, which led to 9/11. So I'm just worried that we don't have enough long-term thinking about how we stabilize the region. And there's way too many people I see in the MAGA camp right now on social media that are like, we're liberating the Iranians. It's going to be freedom. It's going to be paradise. And that's what Donald Rumsfeld said about the Iraq war. We're going to be greeted as liberators. And I don't think Israel is going to be greeted as liberators in Iran. I certainly don't think the United States will. So I don't believe it's the right call to put U.S. troops on the ground in Iran. Not that anyone has suggested doing that yet, I think, but I'm worried that's where we go.
I got to say, you're scaring me. You really are. And I don't mean that facetiously. You're really scaring me.
I'm sorry?
Because I said you're really scaring me because I know you said you're sorry. Because I think that is what you're saying is right. What I believe is that that a lot of this is Donald Trump's fault because number one of the relationship that he has with Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't believe that he is strong enough with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm not saying that they should not have done what they did, but there could have been some coordination with the United States, I believe. And as Marco Rubio has pointed out, there is no coordination. They did not wait for coordination. And how did the United States respond? Donald Trump weighed in saying that it was excellent. But what this means to me is that they don't have any sort of compass that tells people where they're going, or at least themselves where they're going with foreign or domestic policy. As we heard, in those congressional hearings, when Pete Hegseth was questioned by a congressman, they said, we don't know where you're going. We don't know what your budget is. We don't know what you're doing. We have no idea, and no one is telling us. We're flying blind here. So I do believe that this is a problem of the Trump administration. I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me posit this question. What is the Trump doctrine for the world, right? America is supposed to lead, and I think one of the jobs of the American president is to say, I'm going to keep you safe, and here's how. Here's how I keep Americans safe all across the country, and I'm going to stabilize as much of the world. We're supposed to be the leader of the free world. Trump was president for a full term last time, and about 6 months this time. What is the Trump doctrine on foreign policy? I don't know, because the guy's all over the place. He loves Putin one day, hates Putin the next day. We're the weakest we've ever been on the national stage, both because we have a weak-chinned bully in the White House, and people know that they can overwhelm him. And that if they fight back enough, he only cares about looking good opposed to actually doing good. So that's number one. Number two, the tariffs internationally have completely isolated the United States, and we've drawn back from the world. Let's go back to U.S. aid for a second. It was hard for Democrats to explain the value of U.S. aid at a time when people are feeling like we're not spending enough money here, but we spend that money in Africa and in other parts of the world to expand our influence. Yes, to help people for sure, but we also do it to be like, hey, America cares. We're helping you. Here's what we're doing to solve the AIDS crisis in Africa, to build roads elsewhere, to build cultural relevance and understanding. Now we've withdrawn from that, and that money isn't gone. China is spending that money everywhere. So right now, China is the leader of the world, and there's a realignment of what is happening in this world where people are not afraid of what's going to happen with the US government. And certainly Benjamin Netanyahu didn't stop and go, what's Donald Trump going to think about this operation? Which I don't think of any president in my lifetime this would have happened without at least a phone call between the two world leaders.
Yeah,
And
and look,
that's the weakness.
yes, but and speaking of that, having a plan, at least with they focus so much on whether Biden was incapacitated or cognitively on the decline or whatever. But at least there were signposts with the Biden administration. At least you had a roadmap. You knew what the agenda was. You knew where they were going. And with Donald Trump, who is also, I believe, has some cognitive issues as well,
100%.
but no one really talks about it.
Not
No
yet.
one knows. Not yet. No one knows. And look at the chaos. What is happening? So this thing that has happened in the Middle East is a huge division in the world, right? And this thing that is happening domestically here in the United States with sending the National Guard into California and U.S. Marines, federalizing the U.S. military, and then having this big, dumb, stupid parade this weekend just for his big ego. There are tanks rolling through American streets.
Yep.
And, and then there may be tanks, who knows, rolling through somewhere in the Middle East.
The streets of LA, potentially, if it continues to escalate the situation.
Right on.
But like here's the other thing. So let's talk about Biden for a second. Like Joe Biden had all these relationships with world leaders that he had built over the course of a career. He understood the value of that. And yes, he had diminished capacity in the last 2 years of his presidency, but he was still able to maintain those relationships. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, he rallied the West behind him. The way that the West rallied around Ukraine is the reason that they haven't been completely absorbed by Russia. And Joe Biden is the one who did that. And he frankly doesn't get enough credit for it. Now compare that to today, where Trump has no meaningful, credible relationships on the national stage, except he's best friends with the president of Turkey, who is a weirdo dictator. And he's best friends with the guy from El Salvador, who is a weirdo dictator. And so we don't have strong relationships to rely on. And then the people who are in charge of our government are not our best. We have people who are leading, like Pete Hegseth, like Tulsi Gabbard, like Marco Rubio, who are there because they're loyal to Donald Trump, not because they're good at their jobs. Rubio is about the best case scenario. And when you ask why 99 senators voted for Marco Rubio, is because they were like, that's probably the best Secretary of State we're going to get. So yeah, I'm going to sign off on that. And I don't like Marco Rubio, but I'd rather he be in the room of the list of available options for me in a Trump presidency. But Pete Hegseth is not up for the job. If we have to coordinate an invasion of Iran, if we have to put boots on the ground to stop Russia from continuing to invade in Ukraine or something like that, Pete Hegseth is not the man for the job. And that's even scarier. So we don't have the right man sitting in the Oval Office, and we don't have the right people leading the departments, and we're withdrawing from the world. So we're seeing a realignment of interests right now internationally. And that's scary to me.
I didn't even think about who is in charge of the Defense Department. Oh my, we are in trouble.
The guy can't even figure out how to use his text threads right. He accidentally texted war plans to his wife and his brother. We're in trouble.
Stand by for a word from our sponsors. Support for the Don Lemon Show comes from Beam. Summer's almost here. And let's be honest, that doesn't mean that we can slow down and take a break. The news cycle is relentless. Every day we get served up a new outrage designed to overwhelm us, take us out of the fight. This is the right trying to scare us. They want us to get burnout. They want us to tune out to what's happening, and they want us to roll over. But we can counteract that by waking up every single day ready, refreshed, and energized. That's why I turn to Beam's Dream Powder. It is a natural sleep blend. It is designed to help you get the deep restorative rest your body and mind need to stay in the fight. Because here's the truth. You cannot sustain the fight without rest. Burnout serves the people in power who love nothing more than to see you exhausted and to see you checked out. With science-backed ingredients like reishi, magnesium L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin, Dream helps you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up ready to organize, resist, and raise hell without the fog or the crash. Since I've started using Dream, my focus has come back, my energy is returned, I am ready to face the day, ready to stand up for the things that really matter. And I'm not the only one. Beam's Dream Powder has improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep for people all across the country. Oh, and did I mention it tastes incredible? It's smooth, it's delicious, and it's easy to add to your nightly routine. Simple, effective, and it works. So right now, Beam is offering up to 40% off their best-selling dream powder for my listeners. It is a limited time offer and the perfect way to overcome that exhaustion and stay in the fight every day. So go to shopbeam.com and use the code word lemon at checkout. That is shop, BEAM.com/lemon. And use the code LEMON for up to 40% off. Sleep well, wake up ready. The fight continues.
You're we still have 3.5 years of this. We're still 3.5 years of this.
Hang on, I got to go get my Wellbutrin. I need to talk with my therapist. You know what? You're exactly right. We are in trouble. And then you have the Christy Gnomes of the world. And then look at who our national security advisor is, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yep. Tulsi Gabbard, who apparently fed the JFK files or something to an AI tool to try to see if they could find out who killed JFK. Like, or so, just some crazy story that I saw the other day. It's just wild. It's just wild, the people we have in control of our government.
Did you watch, well, I've been speaking to people in California, and they believe this whole thing is blown out of proportion, that there needs to be some proportionality, especially among the media. They know with the Trump administration that they're going to blow it out of proportion and blame all of the folks who are, and the Democrats and the people who are in charge in Washington, in California. But they believe that the rest of the country and the world are being misled by the news media, and that it's not as big a deal as what it is. The big deal is that the Trump administration sent those folks in there, meaning national federalizing the military, and they should not have. They poured what's the expression that I want to use here? They poured fire on a flicker.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
they're turning a molehill into a mountain, right? I'll use the other side of that analogy, but like the 99.9% of all of the protesters in LA are peaceful. Where this is happening in LA is happening in 0.2% of the total land area of LA. And LA is a massive city. So it's very small, very contained. All of the people who are blowing up cars and vandalizing businesses and looting, of which there's just a small number of people relatively, they should be prosecuted. They should, to the fullest extent of the law, and that process should play out correctly. In the same way that anybody who was involved in the January 6th insurrection should also be prosecuted for breaking into the Capitol. And the difference is that Donald Trump is so quick to rush in here because he loves the imagery of Donald Trump versus Gavin Newsom, Donald Trump versus California, Donald Trump versus the liberals in LA. And so, but he pardons cop beaters. Yesterday, it was revealed that not only did Donald Trump pardon a cop beater at the Capitol, he pardoned a child pornographer at the Capitol.
What?
Yeah. So I forget his name, but one of the guys who Donald Trump pardoned, while he was being investigated for going into the Capitol on January 6th, they found that he had a ton of child pornography. And they arrested him and charged him for that. And the pardon covers.
Oh, you're talking about for the pardon for January 6th? I thought
for January 6th.
New. Yeah. I thought this was something new that you had discovered.
Well, it came out. I mean, it came out yesterday that like it for sure covers the child pornography case because it was part of the investigation for January 6th. So like, they don't care about law and order. They don't care about keeping you safe. They care about optics. And right now, Donald Trump last week had the worst week of his presidency. The economic numbers were bad. People are struggling. And then he got into a very public fight with his biggest donor, Elon Musk, who called him a pedophile and called for his impeachment on Thursday. And then a full couple days later, Donald Trump's like, I'm going to basically invade Los Angeles, try to escalate this because he thought it would be good for his numbers. And there's 2 polls out this week. He's underwater on immigration. Like, people want stronger borders. They want to kick out violent criminals. They do not want to go after people who are peacefully, and they do not want the military invading American cities. Like, people are not happy with what's happening.
I want to know what's going to happen legally with this case between Donald Trump, the Trump administration, and Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom sued the Trump administration, and then he lost. A federal judge last night reversed it, and then now through an appeal. Control of the National Guard and the Marines now goes back to Donald Trump, and they're going to work it all out next week. So I want to know what's going to happen, to them, what this case means. And the perfect person. So stand by, Mike. I want to bring in Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, I was just telling Mike Nellis here, our friend who's a former advisor to Kamala Harris. I'm interested in what's happening with Gavin Newsom, the state of California, and the Donald Trump administration, because this has gone back and forth. They sued, they won, and now it's been put on hold. and it will be decided next week. What's going on?
So first of all, what's going on is Judge Breyer, the federal judge in California who presided over this case and yesterday's court hearing, found that the Trump administration's actions, specifically Donald Trump's actions, were both lawless in violation of a federal statute and unconstitutional in violation of the 10th Amendment. And just indulge me reading two sentences, Don, because he frames it beautifully at the beginning of his order. He says, at this early stage of the proceedings, the court must determine whether the president followed the congressionally mandated procedure for his actions. He did not. His actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority, that would be the lawless part, and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. That would be the unconstitutional part. He must therefore return control of the California National Guard to the governor of the state of California forthwith. If I can translate that last word from legalese to English, it means right the F now. Now, as you just noted, Don, there has been a stay put in place by the Court of Appeals to no one's surprise, given the sort of consequential legal opinion that was just handed down by Judge Breyer. But the hearing is going to be on Tuesday, or maybe the filing deadline is on Tuesday. So I have a feeling we're going to get resolution, at least from the Court of Appeals, pretty quickly. And Don, I urge everybody to read this 36-page ruling by Judge Breyer because it is bulletproof. As I've said in recent days, there are four things under the law that Donald Trump tried to use to seize control of the California National Guard. He violated all four things. This is a lay down winner for any judge or justice who is an honest broker of the law, the facts, and the Constitution.
Mike, do you have any questions for Glenn? Our great legal mind here.
Glenn, so my concern would be that you're right. On paper, this should be struck down, but it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And we have, in my view, the most partisan Supreme Court that we've ever had. How do you feel like they're going to react to this? Because my POV is that they keep giving Trump more executive power. I mean, they basically told him he's not culpable for anything that he does while he's in office. So what happens there, you think?
Yeah, it's such a great point because I feel like I've been right on paper ever since I retired from the Department of Justice in 2018. And yet, look at how many times I've been wrong because the Supreme Court departs from the plain text of the Constitution, like in the presidential immunity case. I mean, when we have a Constitution that requires, mandates that a president take care to faithfully execute the laws of the country, and the Supreme Court says, no, a president can violate the laws of the country with impunity and immunity. You know, I have forever quoted one of our preeminent constitutional scholars, Yale law professor Akil Reed Amar, when he said that the Supreme Court in the presidential immunity case ruled that the Constitution is unconstitutional. So I agree with you. All bets are off except on paper, including the paper on which our Constitution is written, right? All bets are off because you have at least two Supreme Court justices who are no longer honest brokers of the facts, the law, or the Constitution. That would be, Sammy the Bull Alito and Clarence Thomas, right? These guys have made clear that they are going to hand down ideologically driven decisions and, express language of the Constitution, be damned. But you know what I'm really heartened by? The last three Supreme Court rulings on due process and what it means and who's entitled to it, the votes in the Supreme Court were 9-0, 7-2, and 7-2. They're on a little bit of a justice roll, and I hope that justice ball continues to gather speed and mass and momentum as Donald Trump's abuse of the Constitution ratchets up. This is not sustainable the way Donald Trump is governing, more accurately, trying to rule over the country. And I think the Supreme Court will recognize it, even if we have to write off the vote of two justices.
Well, there you go, Glenn. I love your plain spokenness. And we're on digital now. We're on social. We can say those words. We could say all the words.
And Don, I'm a Jersey guy, so it's really hard for me to hold back, but I still
Yeah.
try to pull back a little bit.
And I'm Louisiana, so we have Louisiana and New York now, and with a little Philly in there. So I gotta, I can be a little.
Last week I had to ask for your
dirty
permission
mouth.
to drop an F-bomb, Don. So
No, this is you can say the F-bomb. I like to say it in context. I don't just like to say it, when there's a need for it. I like to say it.
I curse like I'm from Jersey, but I'm from Nebraska.
Mike, thank you so much. I'm going to see you next week. Next week, same bad time, same bad station.
That was good. Thank you, Don. Glenn, good to meet you.
Good seeing you, Mike.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Thank you, sir. So, Brian, I appreciate you joining us. Brian is an American attorney, a former U.S. attorney, U.S. Army prosecutor, former assistant U.S. attorney in the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, and a former NBC News, MSNBC legal analyst.
You called me Brian and not Glenn, though. I take no
Glenn,
offense.
I'm sorry. Glenn.
It's all right,
Why did I
Don.
call you?
I'll call you Bill from now on. How about that?
You can. I'm getting information, Glenn. Sorry about that. I'm getting information from someone, Brian, who is one of the a former, a source who has been talking to me about information. Glenn, welcome. I'm so glad to finally talk to you. I really appreciate you joining us.
Don, I'm thrilled to be with you. And you may not remember, but when I retired from the Department of Justice after 30 years as a federal prosecutor, the first 6.5, I was an Army JAG prosecutor handling court-martial prosecutions and government appeals. And then for 24 years at the Department of Justice, when I retired, you were one of the first people to put me on air. And I came on with you multiple times. This is when I was appearing on both CNN and MSNBC before I signed with MSNBC. I recently left MSNBC after 6.5 years, asking to be released from my contract 6 months early so I could be all independent all the time. And that's why I'm thrilled to be, on here on Substack with you and so many of the others, Jim Acosta and folks who have decided, you know what, independent media is the wave, not only of the future, it's the wave of the president. So I appreciate what you're doing here.
The wave of the president or the president? What'd you say? Which one?
The wave of the present. And you know what? I don't think the president cares for this independent media all that much.
No, he doesn't care for the independent media all that much. But he's still enamored with legacy media, which is, that's his thing. He sits around and watches cable news all day. But he, and I believe the folks around him are at least smart enough to know what's happening in these spaces. And that, look, when he's running for office, he gets into these spaces because he knows the influence of being on Substack or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or any of these places. What is on your mind right now? Do you want to talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about Padilla, if you want to talk about what could happen this weekend when we have all of these protests around the country. Donald Trump is now, I believe, given law enforcement the go-ahead, the okay to crack some heads, which should not happen in this country.
Yeah, and we need to get out and peacefully protest in numbers that nobody has ever seen before. I know it sounds like I'm paraphrasing Donald Trump there. And I believe we will. We have, I don't know how many thousands of No King's Day rallies that are going on around the country. I'll be speaking at my local one here in Leesburg, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And I'm telling you, I feel like it's building, Don, and I feel like we're just getting warmed up, right? The stat that we hear is it just takes 3.5% of the American people to get out there and to march and to rally and to protest and to stand up and to stand strong and to speak out in order to begin to topple this aspiring dictator, peacefully topple this aspiring dictator. And I think we're going to get there, and I think we're going to surpass that 3.5% target. But what I would love to start with is just a little bit of Donald Trump's legendary losing streak in court over just the last 48 hours. There was an important analysis done by a political science professor at Stanford. This was then sort of carried by Mark Elias's Democracy docket. What this political science professor did is he took all of the Trump-related litigation and he broke it down not by case, wins or losses, but by rulings in each and every case. And it turns out Donald Trump's Department of Justice is losing 96% of the time, the rulings in Trump-related litigation. Don, for decades, I was at the Department of Justice, and guess what? We didn't lose 96% of the time.
Yeah.
We won in sort of an overwhelming majority of the cases, both criminal and civil, that we pursued. So Donald Trump is losing in court, not because judges are lunatics or radical left judges, but because Donald Trump is doing unlawful and unconstitutional shit 96% of the time in the cases that are being litigated. So that is an important trend. And in the last 48 hours, what did we see? We saw Mahmoud Khalil, the lawful permanent resident. Let's start with that. Who's a student at Columbia, a student activist who's been exercising his First Amendment rights. We had a federal judge say, "Oh, wait a minute, Marco Rubio made a determination that Mahmoud Khalil's comments, his First Amendment protected speech, interferes with or endangers the United States foreign policy. Are you kidding me?" And he said, no, he will be neither detained nor deported. Certainly not based on Marco Rubio's word. Shot him down. The Abrego Garcia legal team just filed a scorched earth, severe sanctions motion against the Trump administration for defying the court's orders, both Judge Sini's orders, that's the Maryland judge presiding over the Abrego Garcia case, and the Supreme Court's order to facilitate the release and return of Abrego Garcia. So let's not think that there's some no harm, no foul rule because they finally brought Abrego Garcia back after swearing up and down to the American people it was impossible to facilitate his release and return. They did it. And Judge Sini's, I predict, and predicting what courts will do is a bit of a fool's errand, so let me be foolish for a minute. I predict Judge Sini's will issue sanctions and will find that the Trump administration was in civil contempt and they should pay for their defiance of court orders. And then, of course, we've got the blockbuster case from Judge Breyer in California saying, no, what Trump did to sort of seize control of the California National Guard was unlawful and unconstitutional. Donald Trump can't win a case in court these days. Now, we know all bets are off if he can bubble these things up to the Supreme Court, and we have to hold our breath to see if enough justices will remain loyal to the Constitution. And I hope and I even suspect they will, given the outrageous abuse and unconstitutional conduct of Donald Trump.
And you did not mention Diddy. But anyways, it's I'm kidding. I want to talk to you about, I am not necessarily so concerned because I think when you have protests, Glenn, you always have a knucklehead in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
And I would hope that, they would try to contain that as much as possible.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about violence from the state, meaning the Trump folks and the people who are, they're saying crack some heads, that they may instigate people because those are the images that Donald Trump wants blasted out across the television and over the internet.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. First of all, Judge Breyer did a really nice job in his 36-page ruling saying, protesters don't lose their First Amendment rights to free speech or to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances just because some of the folks out there involved in the protests violate the law or even perpetrate violence. That does not negate everybody's First Amendment rights. And that's an important principle to keep in mind. The other thing is, listen, we know Donald Trump has an appetite for violence. Remember what he said during his first administration. Can't the military just go out and shoot the protesters in the legs? So I agree with you. There is a risk of violence. And Donald Trump...
And the gassing them in front of the White House, remember?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And Donald Trump hopes that the risk of violence and maybe even the fear of violence in the minds of some of the folks who are debating whether to get out there and protest or not will sort of tamp down the numbers of the people who come out. But then I've heard a lot of people in recent days say, yeah, but the more people who protest, doesn't that give Donald Trump a pretext to, for example, be heavy-handed, use the military, maybe even invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law? Aren't we damned if we do and damned if we don't? To which I say, we may be. We may be damned if we do and damned if we don't. So how about we do? How about we do instead of sitting at home and we don't? Because then we know we will be feeding the dictator. But if we get out there and we do, and God forbid they perpetrate violence against us, that will further accelerate the demise, the political demise of this aspiring dictator, this autocrat, in my opinion. The more he ratchets up the abuse of the American people, Don, against our constitutional rights, the more weakness he shows, and the more I think the tide will continue to turn against him.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught it, the political demise, because you know how they are these days. You're an attorney, you got it, you caught yourself. Here's the thing, I'm really nervous about it. I am, and I was thinking of going to Washington D.C. I'm not going to go there, and I think the folks who are organizing the biggest protests are saying, "Don't go there,"
Yeah.
because that's what he wants. What Give us some advice, Glenn, on what you should do if you're instigated, if somehow something happens, if you happen to be detained or arrested. What do you tell folks here who may be listening and who can spread the word?
All right. So the word for the day is peaceful, right? You can lock arms. You can move forward slowly, not lunging, as Senator Padilla didn't do. I didn't appear to lunge at anybody. That whole thing is pure folly and theater orchestrated by the Trump administration. And I hope the California authorities, because when you commit a crime on federal property, guess what? That federal property was located in the state of California. So I hope to hell that the authorities in the state of California investigate what appears to be an assault and excessive force. I hope they do that. But what you can do is remain peaceful. I mean, we have seen peaceful marches, right? Getting in good trouble. And the bottom line is, if they try to take you into custody, this is really hard, but don't resist, because that will give them the opportunity to ratchet up the force they use against you. Don't resist. Let them take you into custody, because one, they're either going to release you without charges, and I can do a deep dive. I was a prosecutor in the courts of Washington, D.C. for 24 years, both federal court and local court, because we're the only U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. of the 93 U.S. Attorney's offices around the country and in the territories that are not only the federal prosecutors, but we're the local prosecutors, because there are no district attorneys in the District of Columbia. It's a federal city. So we did it all. So we worked protest cases as prosecutors. And what I can tell you is the overwhelming majority of arrests that are made at protests, no charges are ever brought. It's called no papering the case. We don't have the capacity to do it. And most people, there is a really strong argument that they're exercising their constitutional First Amendment rights when they were placed under arrest. Now, if you assault a police officer, you're throwing rocks, you're throwing bottles, then all bets are off. Don't do that, because that's a crime. But if you're taken into custody, don't fight. Because here's the other thing that I learned as a career prosecutor. Police have a very difficult job to do. And I have always been a big police supporter. I worked with every law enforcement agency in Washington, D.C., and you can't swing a cat in D.C. without hitting some member of the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the Park Police, the Capitol Police, the Secret Service Uniform Division, the U.S. Marshal Service, Postal Police, Amtrak Police, Metro Police. You get the point. Whole lot of police in Washington, D.C., and the overwhelming majority of them, in my experience, Don, are protect and serve kind of people. They do their job honorably. But what I have also seen in excessive force cases, some of which I handled as a prosecutor, is once that adrenaline gets flowing, even in the most well-trained, thoughtful, level-headed police officer, it's very hard to control that adrenaline surge. So if you are being taken into custody and you start fighting, because that is also a protester's natural reaction, an adrenaline surge, you have to try to control it, and that will let the police officers, the good ones, control what they're doing, not engage in excessive force, and then let the system take care of it, because the system from the inside, I can tell you, is not looking to prosecute protesters. We may be looking to prosecute people who intentionally assault police officers or set fire to things or loot businesses, because we can't have that. So peaceful is the word for the day tomorrow.
Very, very good advice. Very good advice. Again, and let's just hope that it's not stirred up by either side. I'm glad you said that because I'm wondering when you see those police officers who are out there, and also the members of the military who have, you know, been put in that situation, I believe, by the president. Let's just be honest; he's putting these folks in the
Yeah.
situation, especially in California. Um, they don't want to do some of the things that he's asking. They don't want to have to go out and just randomly arrest people or whatever. Of course, no one should be spitting on them. No one should be throwing rocks at them. No one should be assaulting a police officer. But these people have wives and husbands and children and families, and many of them are immigrants themselves. And so they, I believe, have some empathy and compassion for the folks out there, but they are being forced to be in a tough position, I believe.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Most of them probably don't want to be doing what this administration is requiring them to do. So I think we have to break that into two parts. One, just as is true in the military, I was active duty Army 6.5 years. And you know what I had drilled into my head at both officer basic training and then when I went to the Army's JAG school after I graduated law school is that, yes, we must obey lawful orders, but even more importantly, we are duty bound to disobey unlawful orders. And every member of the military is going to have to make that decision for themselves. I'm talking with some military law experts right now and hope to put some videos out soon encouraging the members of our armed forces to remember their oath to the Constitution and their responsibility to disobey unlawful orders. But the same holds true to law enforcement more broadly. You cannot obey unlawful orders from the President of the United States or from your agency head or from your captain or your lieutenant or your sergeant. So everybody has to make the decision for themselves, and they're going to have to live with the consequences. Because listen, if a soldier or a sailor, a Marine, an Air Force member disobeys an order and it turns out it was a lawful order, well, then they're looking at potentially a court martial or what's called Article 15 non-judicial punishment. So these are not easy calls, but when has fighting for our republic ever been easy?
Yeah. I spoke to a gentleman from Mississippi yesterday, and he said his son is in the army, and he said my son is out there with, and he believes his son is a Trump supporter. This person was not. He said he's out there with these guys with all of this adrenaline and rah 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 and crack some heads or whatever. And he said to his son, he goes, "Listen, son, remember, you did not take an oath to a person or president. You took an oath to the Constitution. And so you remember that when you're out there, because if you get yourself in trouble, it's you in trouble. Donald Trump is not going to face any consequences. Your friends won't face any consequences. You're going to face the consequences." And he said, I think, I got to him. I think he gets it. And you're saying the same thing.
It's such a great point. And here's what I believe from my time on active duty, even though it was many years ago. I think the same holds true today. I think the armed forces of the United States have more Mark Milley's than they do Mike Flynn's. And I hold fast to that. Donald Trump and, his entirely unqualified Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, believe that they can fire their way through the ethical leadership
Oh
of
my
the
God.
military, including firing the three top lawyers, the judge advocates general for the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army. And they are under this misimpression that the next layer of leadership beneath them are somehow going to do Donald Trump's corrupt bidding. I don't believe that for a minute. All of the JAGs went through JAG school, from the generals to the lieutenants that get spit out into the field for their first assignments, like I did many years ago. And they're all taught the same thing about loyalty to the Constitution, not to a man, not to a tyrant, not to a dictator, and the responsibility to disobey unlawful orders. So I think I've always said, Don, at the end of the day, Donald Trump will have to turn to the military to try to keep himself in power and in office the way he is violating the Constitution daily. And I think it's a miscalculation that the military will support the aspiring dictator. I think at the end of the day, they will support the Constitution.
Well, I hope. I mean, look, again, this is not um, condoning violence of any type, but one of the main purposes of the Second Amendment is for a tyrannical government, is it not? And so we could be put in a very difficult position if it does come to fruition about what you said. And I want to know, where are the Second Amendment folks? Where will they be then? Do you know what I'm saying? So again, not condoning any violence here, but
No, I do know what you're saying, and I have seen in my career as a homicide prosecutor for a couple of decades and a RICO prosecutor who handled violence-driven RICO cases in Washington, D.C. Guns have done so much more harm than good, probably tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. And the Second Amendment does say that a well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that well-regulated militia, the reason the founding fathers put that in there is because they recognized the danger of a tyrannical government trying to rule over the people. So, I think this is an unassailable truth. The folks who are opposed to Donald Trump's tyranny are probably not the folks who have an arsenal of weapons in their home or readily accessible to them. Because listen, the Dems are, kind of less likely to be gun owners, and the Republicans are more likely to be gun owners. I don't even want to talk about, as you say, I'm reluctant to broach this subject, but the constitutional provision is there to protect us against a tyrannical government. And Don, we have a tyrannical government now.
Well, that's why I brought it up. And again, like I said, I'm not condoning any violence, but that is one of the main reasons for the Second Amendment. And most of the folks who are on Donald Trump's side are hey, Second Amendment absolutists, so to speak. I want to ask you about, Glenn, let's talk about Senator Padilla yesterday. As you're watching and you're familiar with police tactics and how they're law enforcement, how they're supposed to conduct themselves, whether they're putting themselves in any type of legal jeopardy, et cetera. When you watched that video and you saw what happened and how he was treated, what did you think?
Yeah, so the video is alarming, but as a former career prosecutor, I want all the evidence before I'm going to take a hard and fast position that a crime was committed. And based on the versions of the video that I've seen, we don't see how things started. But from the moment the camera is rolling, it doesn't appear that the senator is doing anything aggressive, doing anything threatening, doing anything inappropriate. He's announcing his name and his position several times over. So when Kristi Noem says he didn't announce who he is, that's just a lie, an outright lie that is contradicted by the video evidence. What I would want to do is interview everybody in that room. If I were a prosecutor in California, I would be cutting grand jury subpoenas all day long to make sure I brought everyone into the grand jury who had any relevant evidence and information about what went on, particularly prior to the cameras rolling. But not even that. You need to know what each person said, what they said before, during, and after. Because when people talk afterwards, people who had a firsthand, front row seat to what went on, and they talk about it, that becomes admissible evidence too. So what you need to do is investigate the entire thing and then make a decision whether a crime was committed. And if so, if a charge should be brought, if an indictment should be pursued. It looked like excessive force based solely on what I saw on that video. There was no need to put him on the ground. There was no need to handcuff him. He had announced, "Hey, there's my buddy." And when I said, Mike Fanone just popped up on the screen, and I may have flinched a little bit.
That's scary.
So yeah. So
That
what
would scare
people
anybody.
what people may not know, not to interrupt my own rant about Senator Padilla, Mike and I worked murder cases together decades ago in the streets of Washington, D.C. We even traveled to the farthest throes of rural Virginia to make sure we held the killer accountable. So I have known this man for decades. I've respected his work for decades, not the least of which is his, heroic acts on January 6th on Capitol grounds. And so I'm thrilled to share a screen with my friend Mike Fanone.
Yeah, so look, Mike and I talked. We did an entire show yesterday, really, on this Padilla situation, and Mike said something very similar to you. From where it starts, from what he could see on tape, there was no reason to treat him that way. Now we don't know. You're right, Glenn. We don't know what happened in the moments before, but to say that he lunged at her and that he didn't identify himself, because from what the time that we see, that was the time where the officers came in to grab him, and and it doesn't appear that they made an effort to do that before. So I'm not sure how aggressive the situation was. And I will tell you, Glenn, as I've been saying with others, and others have been telling me, and I heard Senator Mark Kelly on this morning saying that was an event that he should have been invited to.
Yeah.
Mike Nellis was just on with me and said he entered the room escorted by an FBI agent. So that's according to him. So, what
Yeah, so
his
I have a very hard time believing Senator Padilla lunged in an aggressive or threatening manner at Kristi Noem. Come on now, that doesn't make any damn sense. And I have an objection I want to lodge right now, Don, because Mike Fanone is getting more hearts than I got. And I just want to go on record. I said, no, listen, I'd be giving Mike hearts if I could.
But he's also
I'm
breaking a lot
mashing
more
the
hearts than you, too.
I'm mashing the heart button by myself.
Is that? And if you weren't on this,
Little
we'd be telling
trick
how
of the
you're doing
trade.
it. So, Mike, as you've been sitting here, Mike, I want you and Glenn to talk, because I spoke to Glenn about Senator Padilla. You and I talked at length about that, but also about the possible violence that could happen, and we're hoping that it does not. Glenn has been saying, peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. That's the word of the day, the word of the weekend. But as you look at, and he also had some good things to say about the men and women in uniform in the DC area. Are you anticipating? Are you hearing anything about possible protesting, or what is going on there? How are they preparing?
I mean, I know that DC Police has activated their entire department, which is not. I mean, that is typical for these types of events, and that they have the maximum amount of CDU squads, which are their civil disturbance units, activated as well. But I haven't, from the officers that I've spoken with within the department, they have not heard of or been told about any potential violence planned for that day, which is also not uncommon. That we would not be aware of that prior to it happening.
Yeah, Glenn, you got any questions for Mike?
Yeah, Mike, when are we going to do a live together so I can get a tattoo along with you getting a tattoo?
Wait. We need to live stream that.
No,
Yeah,
Mike live streams
I've
his
already beat you
tattoo.
to it, Don. I get
Yeah.
tattooed on my. I was telling Jim Acosta this the other day. I was like, I'm not like you guys. I'm not an educated career journalist like you, Don. I'm not an educated career prosecutor with all these laurels that you have, Glenn. I'm just a bum cop, and I'm not even a cop anymore. So I have to
So you're
resort
just a
to
bum.
all types. Right. I just have to resort to all types of shenanigans and antics to try to get people to mash hearts for me and, join my Substack.
All right, let me respond to that. Mike's talking out he's talking out his ass right now because I put Mike on the stand to testify in a murder case, and what I knew is I was going to get the truth and nothing but the truth, just nothing exaggerated, nothing to just kind of make the defendant look bad. No, you're going to get the straight up truth, and that's why I loved working with guys like Mike Fanone, and frankly, Don, the overwhelming majority of the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. All of those federal agencies that I spit out a minute ago, I enjoyed working with each and every one. But my bread and butter was working with the homicide detectives of the local D.C. cops, MPD, because they spoke for the dead each and every day. And Mike was part of that, even though he wasn't a homicide detective. He was involved in murder investigations. And so, yeah, Mike may play down his intelligence, but don't be fooled.
Oh,
I appreciate that, Glenn. Thank you.
by the way, I know about Mike's intelligence. But anyway, so listen, both of you, Glenn, if you have to go, let me know. But I want to get both of your responses to this if you can. Let's see. So this is on. I'm getting this from my friend sent me a posting online. There's a lot of talk about the Army parade. The biggest question I get from folks is, will a tank break down? It's the ultimate nightmare scenario for the Pentagon military. Okay, so, but then this is Jennifer Griffin, who's reporting from Fox News. Jennifer Griffin says, the Army parade tomorrow is also a nightmare security scenario for authorities following the increased threat from Iran following Israel's airstrikes. That does add another layer on top of this, Glenn.
Yeah, it does. And, Donald Trump throwing himself a military parade is like straight out of Kim Jong-un or
Yeah.
Putin's playbook. It's disgusting. It's despicable. Mike and I participated in an event not too long ago at which he was honored. And I actually had the honor of hanging a medal around his neck. And it was given by a nonprofit organization that has been dedicated for years to eradicating veteran homelessness. Don, do you know how much veterans homelessness could be eradicated by the $50 million or $100 million Donald Trump is wasting of taxpayers' money to throw himself a military parade? He is the living embodiment of fraud, waste, and abuse. And I want it to come off, peacefully. I want it to come off without a hitch. I hope it rains like hell on his military parade, and it can rain on our No King's Day rally tomorrow. I'm good with that. Never messes with my hair. But yeah, I am concerned about what happens tomorrow in downtown DC.
Well, Glenn,
Yeah,
I hope that you can join us tomorrow because Mike and I and some others, Mike and I, Jim Acosta, Joy Reid, and Jolly Good Ginger, and some other folks are going to join us live tomorrow. I'm starting at 3 o'clock Eastern time. We're starting at 3 o'clock Eastern time on the Don Lemon channel. It's also going to be a Jim Acosta Substack. It'll be on my Substack and my channel as well. And so we hope that you can participate and you will call in and speak to us wherever it is you're protesting tomorrow at 3
yeah,
o'clock.
I'll be at the courthouse up the street here in Leesburg, but I'm happy to jump on live from the courthouse if the rally timing permits me.
All right, Glenn, thank you. I'll see you soon. Okay, buddy. Thanks for
Great
joining.
being with you, Don. Great to see you, Mike.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you, Glenn.
All right.
Take care, buddy.
All right.
So, let's talk about that added layer on top of it with what happened in Iran.
Well,
So how do you guys prepare for that?
I mean, listen, local law enforcement, the most that we can do to prepare. I mean, obviously, there's going to be elements of the Metropolitan Police Department that are going to be working with or in conjunction with federal agencies. That being said, I mean, the rank and file officer is going to be out there on the street, most likely dressed, in preparation for some type of domesticated event like a riot or other breach of the peace. So when it comes to preparing for some type of terrorist event, I mean, it's basically the same level of preparation for the rank and file officer, regardless of what the scenario. And I can't speak to the intelligence gathering at that level because I worked narcotics in my career, and so that's way outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. But you're in the area there. Is there a concern? Is there a concern about violence? And not just necessarily from the protesters, but from the administration kind of instigating it as they did in California by bringing in the National Guard, where I call it pouring gasoline on a flicker.
Yeah, no, I mean I've spoken with I've spoken with officers who work within the intelligence realm at the Metropolitan Police Department and other agencies in DC who have said that there's a real concern of pro-Trump enthusiasts intermingling with these protests and then acting or committing acts of violence to simply give the optics that these protests are violent.
Infiltrating the protesters.
Yes.
What, didn't they say that about Antifa? They said that Antifa instigated it on January 6th.
Yes. I mean, that was a debunked theory.
Oh my God.
You know, I'm not familiar with every single person that was there that day, but of the 1,500 individuals that were arrested, many of whom committed acts of violence, there wasn't a single solitary individual that was identified as having been a member of Antifa. In fact, the exact opposite. Through social media, their own personal admissions, and other investigative tools, each and every one of those individuals was identified as somebody who had been supporting Donald Trump, not just on January 6, 2021, but in the weeks, months, and years leading up to that.
Mm-hmm. Are you concerned? Look, I know this may not be in your bailiwick, but we've been around for quite a while. You're a bit older than I am. Um, look, I've been through this before, and you know, I have been paying attention to the news, and now it appears like IDF rockets have been launched towards Israel, and you get that feeling like, oh my gosh, here we go into this period of unrest that puts all of us in danger, physically, and I do believe mentally as well. This is a tough time to be in. I think it speaks to the lack of um, guidance and discipline in the Trump administration, that they can't even figure out how to work something out with Iran and Benjamin Netanyahu, and they have to send in the National Guard and to a place where it's not needed. It just speaks to the incompetence of this administration.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, just as an American, it's a very scary time to be an American citizen, especially one that cares about the Constitution and democracy and the future of this country. You see the disorganization at the highest levels, and you can't not question their ability to handle world conflicts like the one that's happening between Iran and
Israel.
Israel. And so, yeah, I mean, it's concerning. As a former law enforcement officer, someone who, I mean, I remember vividly the state that this country was in the aftermath of 9/11, and I remember what it was like during the Second Iraq War. Um, the heightened alert states, constant heightened alert. I mean, it was exhausting. I remember working 12 to 16-hour shifts for what seemed like the better part of a year. Just you know, in fear of what was going to happen, or in our department's fear of what might happen, as Washington, D.C. is certainly at the top of the list for potential targets in this country.
Yeah. I was going to say that there are three places that get the most attention in this country as it relates to anything that happens. Washington, D.C. Well, I believe New York City is number one. If something happens in New York City, it is, breaking news. Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. And you're right. Washington, D.C. is indeed a potential target. And you go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and just to play it to that, you know, most police departments in this country are overworked, undercompensated, and understaffed, dramatically understaffed. And you can certainly describe the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. as being understaffed. And so that's why it's so absurd and ridiculous that the president of the United States would hold a birthday bash and a military exploitation parade in which it forces thousands of uniformed police officers to stand out in what is most likely going to be a hot as shit day in potential rain.
Rain.
And now I just want to, for those of your viewers who are not familiar with, the way law enforcement works, street closures are going to begin well in advance of this parade. In fact, I believe that the street closures have already begun. And so those street closures require police officers to staff them. And so now you've got officers, many of whom I know and have spoken to, who've had their days off canceled, their shifts changed, and they're working, exorbitant hours in addition to the already strenuous job that they have, just so that they can facilitate this ridiculous display for a man who doesn't deserve it whatsoever. And that's also adding to, in a time where we're experiencing overseas, like this conflict, in the Middle East. We're going to utilize our military in this manner, forcing them to what I would imagine is cancel their days off, their time with their families, so that they can go and march around in extreme ass fucking heat in the rain, just so that Donald Trump can, get his jollies off, seeing a bunch of tanks and toys and is what he views as his personal, shit.
And toys. He thinks it's his. So
Yes. He's like a 10-year-old playing with little toy soldiers and tanks. And, yeah, I mean, like it, it's just, outrageous doesn't even, begin to describe it.
yeah. Well, oh my gosh, I'm really nervous right now about what could happen and the potential for the possibility to have places targeted, possibility because of what's going on, already targeted because there are going to be instigators in the crowd, which, they always pose a threat. Someone in the chat said, let me see who said that earlier. I hear the Proud Boys are going to try to infiltrate the protesters if there are any. By the way, the protesters and the information that you got, by the way, you spoke or at least have received or heard communications from this, what is it, No Kings group. And they don't plan on having any presence at all in Washington, D.C. because of this possibility.
That's right. Originally, there was a protest that was planned for Washington, D.C., and they've since abandoned that. I think they put out a press release, if I remember, that they didn't want to draw attention to, to the parade itself. And I can understand that. But I think that a lot of it has to do with fear. I think there's a lot of Americans that are afraid. I mean, I've been talking to average everyday Americans ever since, really for the past 4+ years, but ever since, Trump won re-election. And that is the consistent feeling is, for those who oppose this administration's inhumane policies and unconstitutional policies, there's a fear to speak out against it because of the way that they see their fellow Americans being treated. I mean, look at LA. I mean, my social media accounts are filled with video footage of federal law enforcement officers treating American citizens in a way that, as a career law enforcement officer, I would simply describe as unlawful, outrageous, and unjustifiable. And it's not normal, but Trump is normalizing it because there is no accountability for these egregious acts. He has said that this is what he wants. He wants officers to be heavy-handed. He said that many, many times publicly. And he has installed people at these agencies who will not provide any level of oversight, will not discipline these agents and officers. And, knowing law enforcement culture the way I do, they probably celebrate it.
Really?
Oh, no doubt. No
Tell me
doubt in my
about that.
mind. I mean, listen, when I was in law enforcement and I was put in a lot of positions arresting people that did not want to go to jail. I was even involved in mass demonstrations early in my career. And especially in mass demonstrations, when you know that you're being videotaped, you know that, every action that you do is being scrutinized. You handled each and every scenario with literally abiding by what is the standard, which is using the minimal amount of force to effectively, either arrest the individual if that's what's taking place, or to, de-escalate the situation, the minimal amount of force. And what I've seen, not by every officer, not even by the majority of the officers, but by enough of the officers, is individual egregious acts. We talked about it the other day, this journalist who was clearly reporting live, and is shot with a rubber bullet. I didn't see any activity that was occurring in the immediate vicinity that would have justified that level of force. And I've seen it, displayed time and time again.
Well, look, I hope tomorrow is peaceful, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow and see what you report to us, because you're going to be our man in the field, our eyes and ears in the field. And you're a little guy. You're a little guy, so I hope you take some security with you, because I know you're dainty and delicate, and I don't want anybody to,
No, I'll be fine.
I need to talk to you on the phone, though, so let's talk after this. Michael Fanone is going to join us. Our coverage tomorrow begins at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch us on the Don Lemon Show channel on YouTube. You can catch us on Substack. You can catch us with Jim Acosta and with Joy Reid as well. It's going to be me, Jim, Joy, Michael Fanone. Glenn Kirschner says he's going to join us, Jolly Good Ginger, and there are going to be many others who will join us. So make sure you join us tomorrow, and check us out at 5 o'clock Eastern Time today for Lemon Live at 5. Mike, I'll see you soon. Thank you, brother.
Hey, let me real quick, let me plug my so 5 o'clock today, I'm doing my BYOB with Jolly Good Ginger, and we're going to talk about...
Are you trying to kill my audience?
No, man, I've always had the 5 o'clock hour. You're stealing my audience. But no, we're going to be talking about Trump's speech at Fort Bragg. We're going to be talking about his military exploitation parade. And we're going to be talking about the calling up of the Marines and sending them to Los Angeles, amongst other things. So tune in.
Jolly's going to be on with me at 4 o'clock. Or 4 or 4:30. 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock.
He's a busy motherfucker, man.
He is. I know. And then I'm going to be on with I think Jolly and Jolly and, or it's Jim. Maybe it's me, Jim, and Joy at 4:30 on Substack. So we're busy. Yeah,
I'm free between 4 and 5.
Okay. See you, brother. Love you.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.